Neonic Void Productions presents.
Hello, and welcome back to Spookocalypse. Why am I talking like this? I have no idea. Hi, I'm your host. Wow. At me, Bunyip.
What?
At me. Hi, I'm Zio. What's popping? What's being spooky and ooky up in here? What's up? Cause you know Bunyip.
Yes, that would be me.
Yeah, that's him. Yeah, that's correct. Anyway, so housekeeping. Housekeeper is MIA. Still, girl, we miss you. We miss you. Come back. I really need to get that script from you for the housekeeping. I really do. I keep forgetting.
What if they're gone long enough that you completely go off script and start talking about something else?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. So if you want to go look at that description box, like you do, you'll see a link to the link tree that will take you to the other podcasts in the Underwood Productions, as well as the YouTube channel. If you want to go watch it on YouTube, go follow us to subscribe. We also have a Twitter, because I'm not calling it by that stupid ass name. I didn't forget that. We are on Twitter at Spookocalypse, SPOOKOCALYPSE. I mean, yeah, go follow us, go subscribe. Go listen to us on Spreaker, or Spotify, whatever you listen to podcasts, please. We would like more listenership. And today's favorite mint is, I have no idea. What would be today's flavor of mint?
Let's go with lemon.
Lemon. Yep, it's lemon, y'all. Huck her up. It's extra sour lemon too. So
it's like homemade lemonade sour.
Ooh, that's good.
And we're not talking Kool-Aid where they definitely make it more sweeter. We're talking like
freshly squeezed lemons.
Yes.
Oh God, that sounds good. So today's episode is a two-parter. And this is going to round out the rest of Pride Month. Happy Pride to all you fellow queers out there listening in. As a fellow bisexual, I am thriving in this month too. Air dab. I'm literally dabbing at the mic right now, and I feel like a loser. Thank God no one's here to watch me. They got record this video-wise. Dab. So today, we are going to be talking about a docu-series, the first two episodes for a docu-series called Queer of Fear, The History of Queer Horror. Now, this is not a topic we've hit this topic before. I had mentioned it before on this podcast, as well as the Book Watchers, because y'all, the gays are all over the horror genre, and you can interpret them as metaphors. And this docuseries on Shudder does just that and goes over the history of the gays and the genre of horror. And then it goes over the filmmakers behind it and the writing of said films, and how us queers could take the metaphor of some of these horror icons and kind of fit it to our lives, which we'll soon find out. Also, Shudder. Again, it's on Shudder, so if you want to go watch it, it's only 4 episodes long. It's a very good watch, in my personal opinion. I like it. Because obviously, as a bisexual man, anyone can watch it. You don't have to be gay to watch it. Bunyip's not gay.
Should we talk about the people who starred in it, like the interviewees?
Oh, yes, the interviewees. So they have everybody from like, oh God, where do I even begin? They have drag queens on there, of course. They have Alaska Thunderfuck. Love her. They've had Bendela Creme. They have oh God.
Peaches Christ.
Peaches Christ. They've had, oh God, what's her name? Mayhem Miller was on there as well. I think that's all the drag queens. There might be one more that I'm missing. But I think that's the majority of the drag queens. But they have drag queens, they have writers, they have film actors, they have directors. They've had people from all over the horror genre or associated in that circle. Or I mean, in this case, drag queens that are fans of horror or kind of just like horror adjacent. So you get a plethora of different people. Let's see. Let me find some other ones here.
I do have a little list. We've got
Go for it.
Harry Bischoff. We have Michael Feinstein. We have Roberto Aguirre Sacasa. Mark Gatiss, Kimberly Pierce, Karen Kusama, and then there's Peaches Christ. We mentioned them. Carmen Maria Machado, Emily St. James, Alonso Durald, Justin Simeon, Leslie Headland, Tommy Pico, Leah Delaria, Brian Fuller, and Bruce Blanche.
Yep. And that's majority.
Listed.
Huh?
That was all that was listed.
Yeah. I think there's a few more people, but that's majority of everybody. I mean, obviously, the drag queens are listed off there in it as well, but the only ones that are listed here are Peaches Christ and Alaska Thunderfuck. Because some of the other ones only appear a few times.
That name made me do a double take of like Alaska Thunderfuck.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Love her.
We also have someone called Shy Boy or Mark Newbar who composed the music.
Yes. Love Shy Boy. He's great. The music is great in this docuseries. Like, it really gets the vibe. So today we're only going to be talking about the first two episodes. The first two episodes deal with the writers and then the directors and filmmakers and then Hollywood as a whole with horror and queerdom. So getting into episode 1. I mean, they start off the episode pretty on point with the start talking about Mary Shelley, the mother of science fiction and horror. You have anything to add to that?
I kind of missed it. I was looking at my notes like, what do I do next?
Well, okay, so it kind of goes into Mary Shelley and how she created Frankenstein, the story of Frankenstein's monster or Prometheus. Oh God, what's the title called? Prometheus.
Modern day Prometheus.
Yes. Frankenstein, modern day Prometheus. Yes. And it talks about how she created the story with a bunch of friends and they're making ghost stories and shit, and how she was kind of in a throuple with two gay men, but she wasn't really interested in them in that way. And how her and these two guys got basically kicked out of London. Was it London or England as a whole?
I don't know if I caught that part. It might have just been London.
It might have just been London because they got kicked out. They got kicked out somewhere and they kind of just live on their own and do their own thing. And then it goes into how Mary Shelley has, there's speculation that she's into women. I mean, it's not really speculation. Honestly, when you read some of the letters that she wrote about a particular woman and her life, bombastic side eye, girl was into women.
Yeah, and I have a note here like Mary hung out with her husband and his bros. Is this phrase?
Yeah.
And I was like, they're all doing it.
Oh, all of them doing it. Straight up. And they kind of talk, I think if I remember correctly, they were kind of talking about how she married her husband for the mere fact of like keeping face pretty much. Cause obviously her husband is into men. So there's a lot of that. I don't think it really goes into Mary Shelley that much. I mean, it goes into her upbringing and why Frankenstein's monsters applies to her in a sense of like Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein's a doctor. The monster is made out of mismatched body parts that the doctor got from a bunch of graves and shit. And it kind of talks about how she kind of does the same thing because she tries to hide. She obviously hid her queerness. So she basically made a monster, quote unquote, so that she could be perceived basically without being, hiding in plain sight as a queer without anyone knowing, even though, it was pretty obvious in the letters she wrote and shit. I'm trying to think if there's anything else they talked about Mary Shelley. They talked about her life and they talked about her mother and how her mother died right after she was born and she went to her grave. She visited her grave as a child quite a lot. And apparently, I don't know if this is true, but they mentioned that she had sex on her mother's grave. Now, I don't know if that's 100% true, but I know they mentioned that in the docu. And I'm like, is that for real?
Maybe. I do remember them talking about that.
I was like, is that for real or is that a joke? Because girl, that was great.
So the scariest thing Mary could think of for a story was a man attempting to create life by himself.
Yeah.
Without the help of any women, just him making this creature.
Yeah.
And he's obsessed with his male creation after the monster kills his wife.
Yep.
And the monster, he's not like a bumbling idiot. He's kind of smart and charismatic.
Yeah.
Just difficult to look at.
Yeah, very much so. Because I also find it funny the scariest thing she could think of is a man playing God, which honestly, facts. Period. That's yeah. I agree. I agree. Some men out there are terrible. So obviously the scariest thing she could think of is a man playing God. But no, Mary Shelley is an icon, a legend. I always knew that she was the mother of science fiction, but I didn't know if they considered her the mother of horror too. So that was an interesting tidbit.
Yeah, I also had a note about how they explain how horror was written in general. As if you wanted to write about queers, you needed a coded way to do it.
Yes.
Basically symbolizing certain things in the film. And then there's footage of the devil churning butter.
Yes. Yes.
Staring at the camera, just
yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of that. The gays had to go about things a different way to illustrate what they wanted to talk about or write about. Oh God. Yeah. So this is very, it's very apparent at the beginning of this whole thing that the gays or the queers are looked as obviously looked at as monsters in society, especially back then. So a lot of these monsters could be applied to being queer or closeted or whatever. Oh God. Okay. Oscar Wilde was the guy who did the portrait of Dorian Gray, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So I think that was it from Mary Shelley pretty much, unless I forgot some stuff.
I didn't have any additional notes on her, but it goes into a picture of Dorian Gray, which is about how holding repression will eat you up inside and turn you into a monster.
Yes.
And how the picture gets older and older, but he stays the same.
Yeah, and that's his self-loathing, closeted, hiding the feelings, hiding the gay, praying the gay away or hiding the gay away to the point where he can't take it anymore. So he stabs the picture and then he becomes the monster, becomes what he's afraid of or what. Yeah, that picture of Dorian Gray, I never thought of that story as an allegory for homosexuality. But now looking at it post this documentary, I could see it. I could see it.
And then it goes on to talk about Oscar Wilde being arrested for a crime they called buggery,
Buggery.
which I guess is just another like an old timey term for being gay.
Yeah, back then they normally did not arrest homosexuals, but for whatever reason they decided to make an example out of him. And he could have ran away. He could have left and fled somewhere else, but he didn't. He stood trial and was pronounced guilty for being gay, for homosexual acts, and he was prosecuted for that.
And he was sentenced to 2 years of hard labor. And they say it was considered
Yeah.
a death sentence, but I don't quite understand how that was a death sentence.
Because he probably just worked you to death, but I don't think he died in prison. I'm trying to think when he died in 1900 at the age of 46, but I think he survived, and then he went to, because he died in Paris. He died of meningitis on November 30th, 1990.
Meningitis? Not
Meningitis? Meningitis? Oh my God. MENINGITIS? Meningitis?
I mean, that seems like the closest thing.
There it is. Sorry, I'm dyslexic. Yeah, I think it's meningitis.
Yeah, that looks right.
Yeah. He developed meningitis back on November 25th, 1990, and then he died of it 5 days later. So, yeah, I think he did survive jail time, and then he died, obviously, in Paris at the age of 46. But yeah, he was an Irishman. And he did, of course, The Picture of Dorian Gray is probably his best known work as far as the horror genre goes. And then from there, Oscar Wilde got arrested. All that was popular, hot topic knowledge. Hot topic. And then we go over to the creator of Dracula, Bram Stoker. Now, Bram Stoker, Mr. Stoker, is another Irish writer, born in Dublin in the 1847. He was let's put it this way. He's a closeted gay man that doubled down hardcore after the whole Oscar Wilde fiasco, to the point where he would contact Parliament and try to get them to be like, there should be more laws against homosexuality and shit. And it's like, oh baby, the calls were coming from inside the closet, because homeboy was writing letters to what's his face, Sir
Walt Whitman.
Yeah, he was writing letters to Walt Whitman, who was a out gay man at the time, and he was sending letters of how basically he wishes he could be just like him, how he can meet him, and a lot of gay shit was happening in those letters between those two, or that Bram was writing to him.
And that animation of like Walt Whitman growing wings and flying away to like, oh, he's free. Meanwhile, Bram is wrapped up in vines and thorns.
Yeah, stuck. He feels trapped being in the closet, basically. But after Oscar Wilde's situation, he doubled down by, oh, no, I am a straight man. I am straight. And it's like, babe, no, you're not. Because obviously he doesn't want to be prosecuted, of course. And then he wrote Dracula, which Dracula is inspired by Carmilla, who is a lesbian vampire. Put a pin in that. We'll talk about Carmilla next week's episode.
And she shows up in Campaign 2. Maybe cut this out if it's not released yet.
Yeah, well, it will be. I mean, the first episode gets released this week, but yes, there is a vampire, a lesbian vampire in the next D&D game for campaign 2 called Carmilla. Yeah. Carmilla. And of course, if you know Castlevania, Carmilla's in there too. So Carmilla is a very well-known vampire, the first vampire story published as far as I know. And it's lesbian vampires, baby. But Carmilla gave him inspiration, did Dracula, and then it was originally called the
Undead.
I think it was called the Undead. And then he discovered knowledge on Count Dracula, or AKA not Count Dracula, but like Transylvania, and
found out about a certain war criminal.
And war criminal.
What?
Vlad the Impaler.
I'm gonna carry his legacy in fictional form.
Yep. Wrapped up in a nice little bow of Dracula being in love with a man. Jonathan Harker, again, Dracula is kind of a metaphor for Brom in a way, because he sees himself as a monster for being gay. And that's kind of a recurring theme with horror and some of these writers and stuff, on how they make themselves the monsters because they feel like the monster, and society makes them seem like the monster because they're gay, because homosexuals are evil, sinful creatures. There's something wrong with their head. They're mentally unwell. And it's like, no, babes, we just like the same sex. Leave us alone. Damn. But yeah, Dracula, kind of an allegory for the writer in a way. And it's also very apparent, like in the story of Dracula, if you will take on a journey with us, go on a journey. Dracula has a fascination with Jonathan Harker, right? And throughout the whole story, Dracula's like, I'm going to drink his blood. Sees him as prey, and Dracula's the predator, which again also kind of ties back to how homosexual men are looked at and how they're the predators while the normal straight man is the prey, and how they'll convert you to being gay, even though that's not the case at all. But that's how homosexuals were looked at back in the day. And Dracula even has 3 wives, and he would force them not to go anywhere near Harker. He's like, nah, this one's mine.
He's like, this man belongs to me. And he writes in his journal just loads of times.
Yes. And I was like, oh my God, this is so gay. Again, if you want to hear more about that in detail, we did an episode on Dracula in Book Watchers, actually. Let me look up the episode right quick so y'all can look it up if you want to for Book Watchers. By going to we talk about Dracula. We did a whole month of vampires. That was episode 42 from last October. Gay, all of it, Dracula. So if you want to learn more about that, please go listen to it. It's great. But I go into it how it's literally gay coded as hell. We also did an episode on Carmilla as well from an episode 44, but nonetheless. So that's Brom. I don't think they really went too much into that, because Brom never really was with a man or anything. My boyfriend's being weird. Future Devin, cut this part out. Why are you so high already, my love? You're sure acting like it. Get downstairs. Oh my God. Anyway, any last thoughts on Mr. Brom?
Shoot, I don't remember all that much. I don't know if he had a wife for convenience or if he stayed single his entire life.
I think he was married and he has a child and a wife, or he did have a wife. My love, Brom, he was married, wasn't he?
Oh, Bram Stoker?
Yes. Save for the pod. I think he was married, but it says only married for like 1 year. But yeah, so.
But then we transition into Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I don't remember who wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, though.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Yeah, I think they do go into Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I don't know who. Let me look up who wrote that. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's written by Robert Louis Stevenson. And I don't think Robert Louis Stevenson was a gay man. I think this one was one that basically was like an allegory. Because you can kind of see Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde as a closeted gay man. And Mr. Hyde is the monster, it's the inner gay. So they talk about how you could interpret Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde as a closeted gay man who's trying to hide the homosexuality away. The novel was written at a time. Okay, they talk about the homosexuality. I'm trying to get more info on that. So bear with me here. The discourse on sex in general had become a secret and repressed desire. While homosexuality was not even to be thought about, this represents Mr. Hyde, whose purpose is to fulfill all of Dr. Jekyll's repressed desires. The lack of prominent women in the novel also helps create a homosexual interpretation, since the focus is on romanticizing bachelor boyhood for men. There were some things that Dr. Jekyll did as Mr. Hyde that he was too embarrassed to confess for, even on his deathbed. Which is also kind of correlates to the whole shame of being gay. So you kind of just take that stuff to the grave.
Yeah, and the story seems to be about trying to control oneself and stopping a quote-unquote demon from escaping, because
Yeah,
bad things might happen, at least in his
yeah,
eyes.
yeah, yeah. That's repression. That's putting yourself in the closet so deep you're talking to goat people in Narnia. Doesn't end well. It's not healthy for you, y'all. Y'all are in the closet. Take your time. Come out on your own. Did they talk about anything else in episode 1?
They talk about Faust.
Faust.
Or it's the classic story of like, man makes a deal with the devil. And
Yes.
the footage shows of like he has a wife and he's like, I need you to leave. I need to talk to the man of the house for a moment. Like, let me show you what life has to offer. If only you sign a contract. And it's also like having a man trying to seduce another man away from a wholesome love of a woman.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
In a way, it's sort of like, this seems kind of homophobic, because it's like the woman is the quote unquote right choice in this story, and the man is like the tempting choice. Like, I guess what they're seeing is like it's a choice, even though that's not how orientation works.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then they were like, there was more vampire horror that shows up, and one was Nosferatu, which they described him as supposedly being phallic imagery. And you see him like
Yeah.
rising up and he looks all stiff and rigid.
Yeah. Yeah. It very much is. And it's also a Bram could have sued. Well, they did sue actually. Well, it's not Bram, but I think it was his daughter that sued.
Nosferatu is basically Dracula fan fiction.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah, straight up is. And I think it was his daughter that sued at the time. And they destroyed all the copies of Nosferatu except one got away. And that's how we know that Nosferatu existed today, is because of that one copy that survived. And now they're doing a remake of Nosferatu.
And then this the first episode ends. They mention the pansy craze, which is when many
Yeah.
drag entertainers performed in nightclubs around
Yeah.
1931. And I think this was during a time which it's like, oh, isn't it
Prohibition.
entertaining? When,
Oh, that too.
yeah, like I like back then, I was like, oh, isn't it silly how these men dress up as women? And then closer to, I don't know, the 90s, it became sort of like a joke, like, oh, you shouldn't be dressing like that. And then it reverted differently to where today, to where it's like it's more encouraged now.
Yeah.
Society's kind of weird. Like it just flips flops
Yeah.
between trends.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And then it finishes off by describing the original story of Dracula as ordinary people being visited by a terrible force.
Yeah. Homosexual. Again, ongoing theme, y'all. Ongoing theme. And that's pretty much the end of episode 1. Then going into episode 2, this episode's centered around Hollywood, the directors, actors, and films that are made. Dracula being one of them, the Universal monsters, the Wolfman. Well, the Wolfman goes more in depth in episode 3, but all the Universal monsters, they kind of basically talk about again how the monsters are metaphors for homosexuality. They talk
Yeah.
about,
They mainly go into like Frankenstein.
yeah, pretty much. And how the Bride of Frankenstein did not want Frankenstein as a lover. So it was kind of a liberating thing to where, oh, the woman has a choice or she decides not to be with the man. And then pretty much the rest of the time it talks about the legendary directors like James Whale, who did Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, The Invisible Man.
Oh, the Invisible Man and his antics, like where he's
Yes.
like in that scene just only in pants, and it just looks like disembodied pants dancing
Yeah,
and chasing after somebody.
exactly.
And then that one lady's like, who she's I guess she's like a comic relief in some way in several movies, but she's like, "Excuse me, sir, may I take your hat and coat?" And he's like, "No." And she looks so surprised, like, "Excuse me?"
Yeah. Yeah. Also, fun fact, I know this is going to be really off topic here. The Bride of Frankenstein is technically a ginger.
Like the actress?
No, like the wig.
Oh, like the wig.
Yeah, yeah. Like the Bride of Frankenstein is a redhead. But when you watch the colored version of the Bride of Frankenstein, they paint her hair brown. And I'm like, what the fuck? She's a redhead. She's canonically a ginger. And I'm like, disrespectful. Ginger erasing. As a ginger, I am offended. Anyway, back on topic. I just want to throw that little tidbit out because I thought that was interesting that my boyfriend told me about, that the Bride of Frankenstein's a redhead.
There was a quote someone said is, "You don't always realize that you're different, and once you do, society sees you as something monstrous,
Yep.
internalized self-loathing."
Yep. Yep.
And then I think I put a note like something that gets lost is the transgender narrative. Like Frankenstein
Yes.
making a new body of his own image, of his own making. Like the monster could have been a woman, they made him male.
Yeah.
He could have put himself in a womanly body.
Yeah. In a
And like,
way, it's a transgender story in a way. Yeah. I found
um,
it interesting that they talked about that because I didn't even thought of that.
and most of the monsters are like there's this draw of being empathetic towards the monster. Like they're just trying to be themselves, and if they do anything wrong, it's unintentional.
Exactly. Frankenstein did nothing wrong except for maybe throwing that girl in the water and drowned her. I mean, but it's neither here nor there. It shows the scene of Frankenstein just yeeting the girl in the pond. I'm like, damn. Damn. He's like, yeah. Throws her in the water. God. But that version was not in the actual theatrical cut because they censored the hell out of it. So they took that part out. They took that part out and one other part out. So Frankenstein technically didn't kill anyone in the movie because the only person he killed, I think, was the little girl. But that was unintentional.
Oh, hang on. Which movie is this? Because there's a scene where he like destroys the castle with the bride as well as Dr. Pretorius.
That might have been the Bride of Frankenstein because he kills the little girl in the original Frankenstein.
Ah, okay.
So that might have been the bride because the bride comes in at the very end of the Bride of Frankenstein, which I didn't know because I have not seen the Bride of Frankenstein on yet, which that will change soon. But nonetheless, James Whale was the director for Frankenstein, The Old Dark House, The Invisible Man, Bride of Frankenstein. He brought us a lot of these classical monster films from Universal between the years of 1931 and 1937. And of course, he was a gay man.
And he came out in the 1940s and was a major
Yep.
director in a town that clearly didn't like him.
Yeah. And some of his he had David Lewis, who's a producer, was one of his partners. So he had him and then some other guy. But yeah, no, James was very much an out gay man in Hollywood. And I think it was this guy that talked about how that basically killed his. Was it this one or was it the actor for Psycho? Basically, they were talking about how if you talk to with certain people you talk to, they either tell you that his career was destroyed or his career was flourishing. I think it was James Whale. But I could be wrong.
I don't know. Are you sure you're not thinking of Anthony Perkins?
I might have been thinking about Anthony Perkins. It was one of them. Same
Like,
episode,
if we
but
are, we're skipping ahead a little.
Yeah, I can't remember. I can't remember if it's James. If they're talking about James Wales or they're talking about Anthony Perkins in that. Either way, James Wales, great. Did they talk about anyone else before they dove into Alfred Hitchcock and Psycho?
I think after they talked about how James took his own life,
Yeah,
they started going into Hitchcock, and it was like he was kind of repulsed with sex, but he put a lot of feminine details and artifacts to convey story in this movie.
yeah, and they kind of dropped little hints and talk about how Alfred Hitchcock might have been queer in some way, shape, or form. Because there was a comment that he made either in an interview or something to say if it wasn't for his wife, he'd be, I can't remember what term he used, but basically he'd be, I don't even know what term he used. But it kind of indicated, it kind of gives you like a side eye, like what? That he might have been, the Alfred Hitchcock might have been a closeted man or in somewhere among the alphabet mafia because, I mean, yeah, he wasn't very keen on sex at all. And he always had female leads.
And I don't know if this is around the time like the Hays Code was coming around, where it's like, hey, if you have gay characters in your movie, they have to die
Yeah.
or they have to be punished in some way. So a lot of his characters that were odd or
Yeah.
gay, he had to kill them off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he usually made them villains.
Yeah. He usually did. I mean, the biggest one was Psycho. And that is where we go into Anthony Perkins.
What about Rope?
Rope.
The movie Rope.
Oh my God, Rope. You go into that.
All right.
I'll leave it to you.
We'll do this briefly. Rope is a movie where these two men commit a murder and they stuff the body into a chest. And the way the scenes play out and the way the two interact with each other makes it strongly suggest that the two had sex with each other. So it's like a big allegory for two doing a taboo thing. But
Gay men having sex.
yeah. And there's like one scene where they're standing over the chest and they're sweating and they're breathing heavily. And I'm thinking like if one of them pulls out a cigarette, and sure enough, one of them pulls
Yeah.
out a cigarette, he
Yeah.
starts smoking it. Well, they're just
Like,
like
there it
thinking of what to
is.
do next.
I was like, there it is. They fucked. Oh God, yeah. Alfred Hitchcock, he put that in there on purpose. On purpose.
And one of them, like the taller one, he has top energy, and the other one's a bottom.
Yeah.
Like how they interact. Because
Yeah.
it's just so. I didn't know such things existed back then.
Oh, I forgot to mention. I guess it kind of correlates to Dracula, but you have the whole dom and sub relationship between Renfield and Dracula.
Oh yeah,
They kind of have that weird vibe.
yeah. Renfield was described as like a transference character.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But going to Anthony Perkins, aka
Norman Bates of
Yes.
Psycho.
Yes. So, Psycho is obviously a film about a serial killer who runs a hotel called Bates Motel with his mother. And that's where we get the opening scene, the early on scene of, God, is it Jamie Lee Curtis's mother? Hold up, what's her name? Don't tell me.
I did not know that was who she was.
Oh my gosh, who is her name?
Is it when he's just sitting in like a living room and talking to her, and like the camera angle has him, like it's usually showing like looking up at him, and there's like an owl behind him?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the well-known shower scene where she's taking a shower and he opens the door and he sees mother stabbing the girl.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a different scene.
I mean, that's the same girl, but
yeah.
Yeah, that's Jamie Lee Curtis's mother. Janet, God, how do you pronounce her last name? Leigh? Leigh?
Leigh. That sounds like Lee.
Lee?
Yeah, like Janet Lee.
Okay. Janet Lee. Yeah. Yeah, that's Jamie Lee Curtis's mother. But yeah, we got that, and then of course Psycho, Anthony Perkins. That's where, because they kind of go into with Anthony Perkins, but Norman Bates, how a lot of gay men are very close to their mothers, mama's boys, and I'm like, okay, I feel kind of called out, but all right, thanks, I guess.
And
like,
one of the interviewees says, like, what's going through this character's head, the lady, is like, why is this guy not trying to fuck me?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, you find that suspicious? That someone's just talking to you?
I don't know. I thought that was a little weird. But Norman is very much kind of, they talk about how Norman is kind of a gay character in a way, or a closet gay man, or how like the gayness is turns you into a monster, a killer of sorts. Ooh. And then they kind of go into Anthony Perkins' life and how his career kind of came to a halt and or quote unquote ended after Psycho. And then of course he did Psycho 2 and 3.
Like over 20 years later.
Yeah, over 20 years later. I think he was part of the production team on that one himself too, on the Psycho 2 and 3, I think. But it kind of goes into how Alfred Hitchcock chose Anthony Perkins on purpose for his queer vibes. Because I guess Alfred Hitchcock kind of got the vibe that he might have been a gay man or something, closeted. Turns out, and for Alfred Hitchcock purposely chose him for the role of Norman Bates.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the whole queer undertones of Norman.
Yeah, like
And
the movie Psycho was too right for Anthony.
yeah. Yes.
Like he didn't have to act anymore or be somebody else. He could just
Nope.
be himself.
Yeah. And it kind of ruined him for everybody. Because they could only see Norman Bates. And his son was on the documentary talking about his father. And he comes out and saying that his father was a closeted gay man, which I didn't know that. But he died. They kind of go into his life and his death. His son goes into talks about him as a father. I mean, he was he was a great father to his son, and that him and his mother both did love each other. But Anthony died of AIDS, and his wife or the family kind of doubled down and said that was because of a bad blood transfusion. When in reality, that was not that at all. But they said that to basically keep face and kind of not out Anthony. And I'm like, wow, I did not know that. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I did not know that. I was like, wow. And he died September 12th, 1992. Literally months after my birthday. Wow. And his son was Oz Perkins. The son that was on the docuseries. Did it go into anything else on this episode? Because I think majority of the episode was on, half of it was on Perkins.
Yeah, half of it was like, here's what happened with Psycho, and the other half was like, early directors villainized gay characters.
Yeah. Now, in reality, Hollywood's very gay. It just doesn't want to admit that it's gay. I mean, today Hollywood's pretty gay. But again, we kind of go in the history of that, and of course Perkins and Alfred Hitchcock, and that's pretty much episode 2 of Queer of Fear. So, yeah, so that's today's episode. Catch us next time as we talk about the last 2 episodes of Queer of Fear, which is centered around monsters and the metaphor of being gay. Until then,
Goodbye.